Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Murphy Girl Chooching on a Monday afternoon, September 28th. Warm days are dwindling down. It's getting a little chilly today. Hey, okay, a lot of people have asked me. I'm getting a lot of mail now about the market and about the economy. Mainly because I've been doing uploads for over, well, almost 2 years on the Rosie Murphy channel, a predecessor Rosie Murphy channel, and this Rosie Murphy channel. So some people know, I've had a pretty good record of what's what. I'm not one to toot my horn, but I've been at the market for the better part of 6 weeks now, and we're in a bona fide bear market now. Now that things are intensifying and things are worsening dramatically, and I do have the wind booty on today. I hope this is cutting down some of the wind noise so it's acceptable to you guys. My homemade windsock booty. And what I want to talk about today is, apart from the fact that we're in a bear market, people want to know, A, what's the scope of what we have coming, and B, why is it coming? And let's answer A. Since 1932, the United States has really been in a continuous bull cycle, meaning from the lows of 50 or whatever, the Dow Jones Industrial Average load out in July of 1932, at the very depths of the Depression, before Roosevelt even took office. The market had already bottomed. Basically, we've been on a general uptrend from that 55 level all the way up to 18,300 on the Dow Jones Industrial Average. Now you'll say, oh wow, we've had our scares and butt rippings along the way. The recession in 1973, 74 for sure, the 1980-81 recession, which led to the Tax Recovery Act under Reagan, and accelerated depreciations and a radical cut in tax rates. Yeah, that was a pretty stiff downturn at that particular time. And then of course we had the 87 crash, which was really just a financial panic in scope. It was not rooted in an economic problem. It was rooted in too many derivatives and too many people playing the game of betting on futures against stocks. And when things started to get out of control, it snowballed, and one thing got to another. And then of course we had the real estate implosion of the late 2000s that is still lingering with us today. And that's the brutal reality of what underlies a lot of what's going on with the economy today. Now, the simple fact of the matter is, every market decline, and this could be a very large one here, is underpinned by some equivalent economic problem. In other words, if you have a short, sharp recession, maybe the market goes down 30% or so, you recover. You have a slight slowdown, but then you get in those cases like the 1929 to 1932 crash and bear market. And the reality is, they're so severe and so dramatic that the effects last for years and years, and arguably the Great Depression lasted all the way through the 1930s until World War II provided the stimulus to pull us out. But that market, from its peak in September of 1929 to its trough in July of 1932, lost about 90% of its value. 90%. Well, of course, the economy went on to have its GDP cut in half. from a $100 billion economy to a $50 billion economy a mere 3 years later. That's dramatic. Now, what underlies these things, because I think the scale of what happened in 2932 is unfolding now, because we have unprecedented challenges equivalent to those of the 1930s, where we have really real impairment of not only credit, the ability of people to borrow now is greatly impinged, and you get the credit card offers and blah blah blah. Banks are so desperate to lend money, they don't want you putting money on deposit there, and the CD rates reflect that. And some people theorize we're going to have negative interest rates from the Federal Reserve, which will translate into the economy where you'll have to pay to keep your money on deposit. And you can really imagine the liquidity problems that would occur under that type of scenario, as people pull money out of the banks, stick it in their mattresses. Well, that's the recipe for real economic disaster there. But what's driving the current problems that we have now is really pretty straightforward. We have impaired consumption on a lot of levels, and we've had an explosion of social services and entitlements on one end, and we have a really crimped ability to sustain that on the other end. We've had basically unfettered immigration, where we didn't really police our borders, and I'm not going to get into discussions about the rights and wrongs of immigration. That's not the bailiwick of this upload. I'm just saying you have a ton of people that have come in and effectively undercut the prevailing labor wages here. That wasn't around in the 80s and 90s. That was a real feature. The floodgates opened in the late 1990s, all the way up to the housing boom peaked in 2008. You had people charging into this economy by the millions that were helping to undercut the labor rate, and they weren't just in low-end, they really weren't in low-end retail jobs, but they were in things like construction and traditionally well-paid, and other services, heavy equipment and things like that, roofing, carpentry, all those things associated with growth in a major way started to get severely undercut. The unions lost a lot of power. They couldn't sustain the wage rates that they had. You had a decline in union memberships because people couldn't figure out why unions weren't able to do the job for them and secure a brighter kind of future. In addition to that, because of that, you also had the rise of China and the Far East, with much manufacturing going over to China. Therefore, you effectively gutted a lot of the middle-class wage earners out of that structure. Those traditional good-paying manufacturing jobs where you didn't need a lot of education. Well, so many of them went bye-bye. I mean, just last week, Caterpillar announced they're laying off 10,000 people, and Miller Brewing's closing a plant in the Carolinas. There's just more and more, where you're producing something, not knowledge-based systems that are just moving data around, but actually producing something real. Those jobs are less and less and less. And you couple that with a generation that drank the Kool-Aid, did colleges for everybody, and they're coming out now with $1 trillion of student loans, and their ability to get good jobs is impaired severely. We've seen it on YouTube with people we know. Major in this, you're going to have a bright future. Do this, you're going to go to college. Everybody needs to go to college. So as a result, college prices went sky high. And we have a generation now of indentured servants, for all intents and purposes, that are slave to their degrees. They're not able to purchase cars. They're unable to purchase housing. They're doubling, tripling up in apartments and things. It's kind of sad. And a lot of this can be laid at the government's door with some of their, let's make things better for all. in actuality it ends up making things worse. So given the ability of declining consumption now, you just throw on top of that the burgeoning debt levels of the federal government and the way that we've piled on debt, and the way that the real power of banking now is getting people to borrow money instead of save money. And we've actually reached a point now where it's terrifically difficult to even save any money. And then we reach a tipping point where we just don't have the ability to consume even what's imported now. And we find out very sadly that what we call the service sector, there's really an overlay of a lot of luxury on top of productive activity. Now, what do I mean by that? If you produce something in the economy, there's something tangible, there's something real there. But if you're offering a service, a lot of services people can do without. They can do without high-speed internets. They can do without movies. They can skip restaurants. They can skip so many things that they'll look at when times get tough and say, we don't really need to. We don't really need to go to dinner. We don't really need to go on that trip. And you come to a point where people start cut, and the service sector finally gets ground down. The frosting gets taken off the cake, and then people find out what a really thin layer of services that they're really able to live with. So what I'm saying is the growth of a lot of the service sector is really a temporary luxury on top of the whole economy. Now, that may be an idea that a lot of people don't agree with, and I can understand that. It's not going to be dishing out pudding here. This is hard facts. This is hard opinion on my part. But the reality is that the services aren't really producing anything except the value immediately to the person that's in that vicinity of consumption. In other words, the person that goes to the restaurant, the person that chooses to get their hair dyed, the person that chooses to go on that vacation or have that higher speed or that entertainment or the movies and the movie subscriptions, So you understand what I'm driving at. You complement that, or you put that in the whole mix with everything else, and also throw on top that we have currencies in a world that are basically managed by government fiat. In other words, the government says this is what it's worth, except in international markets. And now we have shaky markets that aren't even able to value currencies correctly in the world anymore. And we prop up the US dollar because there's so damn many of them. And so many people hold it around the world that now we have an interest in propping up something that is at the core of it basically rotten. So that's a recipe where you could have this big liquidity squeeze coming up, where people want to head to the exits in the stock market, get out while they're getting good, and I think we're seeing that now. So that's the reality on a market that's lost its underpinnings. Can it get them back? Yeah, but it takes a long time. It often takes a generation. People have to relearn the rules of thrift. They have to throw out the ideas of being spoiled and this and that. Credit cards, unfettered lending, all that crazy stuff that led us to where we are today. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this Chooch today and have taken steps to protect yourself financially. The hurricane pennants are up. 2 full, the red with the black blocks. It's all underway, guys. Take care, protect yourself. Thanks so much for watching.